Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Brinsley. Yes, we're here. We meet.
Finally, well, say finally. We've spoken for 10 minutes in our entirety of our relationship. So this is going to be nice because I get to find out about you and yeah, dive into your story of building the coaching practice. And I was just saying, sorry about being 3 minutes late onto the call. Really interesting to hear about your story about being 23 minutes late to your wedding. And maybe we can go through that later. I don't know.
Oh dear. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. If you
Sorry
could
to drop
work
that in
that
there.
into it.
I had to just get that in there. So let's start. We're going to look at your personal journey to building a coaching practice.
Mhm.
And if we start in the here and now,
Okay.
what do you do and who do you do it with in a professional context?
Okay, I like that ending, professional context. What do I do? Okay, I'm a life coach. This is how I see myself in part of my prison. Okay. Um, I'm a life coach, I'm a coach supervisor, I'm a mentor, coach mentor. Um, and there's many other parts of me outside of that, but just for the coaching practice, those are the three sort of areas that I operate in at the moment. And they've evolved over the last 7 years. From 2015, they've evolved. That's when I went out on my own to become a coach. So how my business is made up of all those three parts, I wouldn't like to put a percentage on any of them because it is so fluid. It is fluid depending on the year, depending on where I am at that point of the year. So I would say over the last 18 months, I've been doing more supervision work than I have been doing coaching. That's where I've gained a lot of energy, and that's where I'm gaining a lot of enjoyment just at this point in my life. Don't know where it's going. The life coaching is, I'm very, I wouldn't say I'm very choosy, and I love to enjoy being with the people I want to work with. And as a life coach, and I use the word life coach because it took me years to embrace that. I started out trying to work out some label of who and what I was when I went out to talk to people. And it's like, oh, I'm a health and wellness coach. And that got me into all sorts of trouble. Oh, so you coach on sports. Oh, can you show me how to lose weight? And it's like, oh my gosh, this message is totally going wrong. Um, so and then yeah, it took me a while, and now I've come over the last year and a half, 2 years. It's like, yeah, I'm a life coach. I work with people on their life, and for me, it's about enabling someone to take action, and that's something that goes right back to when I first started coaching, where it was all about, and it's not action taken as in the grow model, but it's all about that spark that happens with someone and how I can then enable them, be the catalyst. And you've got that saying that is fortune favors the brave. And for me, I've just changed it a bit and I put action favors the brave. So the people that I work with as a coach are people that I feel I can enable them because they would like to, at this point in their life, take action, and that will make them brave and courageous to create the life they want to. And then as a mentor, most of that work is with Animas. So that's a couple of days a week. I do some mentor work outside of Animas. Have done it with another coaching students that belong to another coaching company. I've worked with some of them to help them to achieve their end goals. And for the supervision, I work with individuals. Some of them are Animas students. and some of them are external people from small startups who are out there coaching, and they recognize that supervision is a way for them to help them to offer a service that is the best service that they can offer, to keep their skills where it needs to be kept, to grow their skills, to be the best coach that they can be. And for me, yes, again, that still brings in that whole thing of action favors the brave. So they want to take action.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I am at the moment, if that any of that makes sense.
It does. It does. And spoken like a real pro there. I love the way you articulated that. So interesting to hear about, I guess, your journey with the word life coach, or the term life coach. And that's an interesting one, because when you described it like that, I was like, yeah, I work with people on their life. I coach people on their life. Makes complete sense. But some people have a kind of, I don't know the word now, but people pull back from that terminology, don't they? The life coach terminology or title. And I certainly do. Maybe because the stigma that's attached to it. And you're comfortable with that now. You're comfortable with owning that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because we're here because something is happening in your life. And you've asked me to be your coach. So let's put the two together and we've got a life coach. And that's it. That's basically it. Part of that is because throughout my life, I've had this thing about being labeled and using labels. I know as a human, we need to have things labeled for us to make sense of the world around us. But I think as a young person, I've had a few labels thrown at me, and then going into, dabbling around in education where you've seen labels being thrown at people, and then going into the workspace where people get labeled. And then it can be really hard for them and others to see past that label and to see the person. And so labels and all that stuff has always been something that I've never worn properly. But I recognize that we all have to use terminologies to understand, where do you fit into this? How can you help me? How can I be with you for whatever reason, and develop whatever relationship that label may give.
Mm-hmm. What labels did you get named or put under?
At school, it was mainly to do with the fact that, young, Black. I can remember when I was 16, I went to one of the crappiest schools in Croydon, Lanfranc High, and I'm proud of it because it taught me a lot of life lessons. I still came out with my O levels and stuff, but I had to be interviewed to go on to do my A levels, at which was a grammar school. So went for the interview, got the interview and everything like that, got there on the first day, and the deputy head, which everyone at the school there called, what's it, Fruit Bat, they called him. And he called me into the office, and there was about four of us, four Black mixed race kids from my school, Lanfranc, that actually got the interview to go to this. Everyone else there at the school was white. And he said, I just thought I'd call you in to have a word with you. And, part of the conversation, he just went on to say, do you think you will fit in here? So, yeah, why not? He said, because, from my perspective, people like you should actually just go out to work. And it's like, people like me, what are you seeing me as there?
Wow.
And he didn't know that he was actually, when someone says things like that to me, it doesn't knock me to say, oh my gosh, I'm not good enough. It's like, who the hell do you think you are? So in some ways, he fed me he fed my energy by being able to call me a people like me shouldn't be here. It's like, you don't know me, I don't care about you, but I know what I have, and I'm just going to come here and get it. I had a lovely 2 years at that school, met some really good people, and yeah, I got my A levels, and here I am today. But that was just one of the, I would say, that was one of the labeling times that really stood out for me. Maybe because I was 16 and in that age range of becoming a young adult and starting to look at who am I in all this world and all this stuff that's happening around me. So yeah.
Wow. I had to stop myself from dropping the F-bomb then when you were describing that story to me. I'm under strict instructions for no swearing on these recordings.
BBC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds like a really interesting and challenging experience to go through at that age. And when it comes to labeling and think about how we fit in the world, it sounds like you've worked through that.
Yeah, I've done. I've offered up silly things because as a senior manager, when I used to work, and they said, "Oh, you got to have a label on your door." And it's like, people know who I am. Why do I need a label? Just put Bugs Bunny on my door. I really don't care. But that didn't actually go down too well with even those more senior to me. It's like, no, you've got to have your name on the door. And it's like, what does that prove? It doesn't prove anything about me. For me, it was me. For me, my legacy is about having those conversations with people. And this is all really evolved, and doing the supervision training on top of the coaching was something that I really wanted to do, and it took a couple of years for me to get there. But one of the things that I came across doing the supervision training was what's it called? Appreciative inquiry. And the guy that I think I'm very bad at quotes, so I'll need to quote it, but David Cooper Ryder, that's it. And I just read one of his quotes, and it said, "We live in worlds our conversations create." And that took me it was a real arc of what I've felt and recognizing some of the ways I've behaved in my life. And it's like, yeah, those conversations, they really do create the world we choose to live in and how we inhabit that world. And that's how I see my coaching and my supervision, as a conversation that will enable this person to then help create a world, a better world, support someone else to create their world in a better way that enables them. And that really, so that's really sticking with me at the moment as I'm evolving. I don't seem to stop evolving. I'm moving all the time as a coach. But again, that's part of my belief in life. I only stop evolving when I disappear off this mortal coil to some other faraway planet.
It's a constant process, right? The evolution of us as practitioners and human beings. So interesting to hear about that, the quote, and how that underpins the work that you do, or the way you look at the work you do. And you mentioned a lot of energy is coming from supervision right now and going into supervision. What's that about? Why do you find yourself in that space currently? More in that space, rather, I should say.
Yeah. I'm trying to make some sense of that. And when I try and make sense of things, it's a bit of looking back and looking forward. And the forward bit is that I can be a catalyst and an enabler for people who are already coaches, who are already practitioners, who will also help me to be a better coach and practitioner by being able to have this relationship as a supervisor with them. Because I still learn from those people that I supervise. I tell them when I'm going to steal things from them, because it's just brilliant what they've come up with or said or devised from something that we're talking about. You know, we could be talking about a blind spot that's coming up, and then they come up with these things. It's like, wow, whoa, I didn't even see that. You know, where's that coming from and everything? It's great. But it also takes me back to just think about the energy I felt when I had junior managers working with me, and when they were inspired to do something more. It's what I could offer to actually help them on that path. And that really energized me. And that was one of the things that that catapulted me into going for coaching and finding somewhere to get trained, which I felt, to use a weird word, properly as a coach. Because I had been coaching within the workspace for donkey's years before I came to Animas.
That's interesting to hear. And you've kind of answered some of my follow-up questions or given a little bit of flavor to that.
Mm.
So let me just reference back what I've heard, and then I'd love to hear a little bit about the story before Animas and why coaching, why you. You trained around 2015. Your practice involves life coaching, mentoring, supervision, and a lot of the work that you do is with, well, in the mentoring supervision space will be with coaches or other professionals or practitioners that want that supervision lens on the work they do. 2015, you trained with Animas, is that right?
I actually trained in 2014, but I then left civil service in 2015 to then become a coach, not knowing where the hell this was going to take me. I had no idea.
Wow. 1 year later, you went for it, did you?
Yeah. It was a build up, because I had been thinking about, I didn't want to be where I was, and that's always been part of my journey. When I don't want to be working in a space, I have to move on, and I've done that throughout my life. I don't know where it's going to take me, but I know I need to do something different. I will find that thing that I need to do different and just go for it. So that was one point in my life, and that started around 2012. All just in my head. 2013, I actually took action and went out, stopped just the thinking, and found Animas. In 2014, I trained and certified, and March 2015, I waved goodbye to working as part of the civil service. I did still do stuff for the civil service, but in my own capacity after leaving that.
Mm-hmm. And what is it about you as a human being that has you show up and do this role as a coach and a supervisor and a mentor?
I find, that's an interesting question. What is it, me as a human being? Okay. I find it very contradictory, because I like my own space. I really like my own space, and I get energy from being on my own in my own space. But I've found over the years that I also gain a lot of energy, even though I can feel when I get drained, and I know I have to then go and re-energize myself. But I gain so much from being with people. I gain so much by watching others create what they want to create. And I gain from being part of that they're willing to share something with me, because they feel that I can enable them in some way. And I just like being that enabler. I've never been one for giving advice. because from that time back when I was 16, when someone gave me advice, it was like, yep, we can't swear here. And I can't use finger gestures, but that's how I felt. And that's always been part of me when someone gives me advice and they know what's best for me. And it's like, really? Okay, I do listen to what people have to say, but just don't tell me that you know what's best for me. Just offer it to me so that I can think about it and chuck it in the bin, or play with it and run with it because it's triggered something else in me. So for me, when someone says, hey, can you help me here? Or I need to talk to you about something, for me, it's about, they're thinking about something. How can I enable that thinking so that they can take from it or get whatever they want from it? And one of the things, because people say, don't ever cross your arms because that looks as if you're withdrawing and all that non-verbal stuff. That is one of my most comfortable positions. When I used to work in the civil service and I had my office, people would come in and it's like, oh, Michelle, can I talk to you about something? It's like, okay, yeah, right, I'm ready. Yeah. It's like, why you got your arms crossed? Because that's me. I'm ready to listen and really feel comfortable now, and I'm focused on what you're going to say to me. I don't cross my arms now because I've come to that. But I always did it, and it really helped me to focus on this individual that was in front of me.
I've got my arms crossed right now, Michelle, and this is how I like to sit. Thankfully, the Zoom screen doesn't bring them into space, but they're here and folded.
Yeah. Okay. How's that going to work for you? It just helped me to really just forget about everything else outside me. It's like I've put my blinkers on and you're the only thing in my space. So yeah, me, yeah. And that's me looking backwards and me looking forward. And relationships and working with people, I still very recently, nothing to do with coaching, but to do with, I actually own a couple of properties that I manage myself. And I manage, at the moment, I only manage one for someone else, and I'm sort of getting rid of those. But I've had some, this week I had a really difficult conversation with someone. Really difficult because of where they're at. And at the moment, their life is full of stuff which is causing them pain. And that pain is coming out in anger and verbal abuse and stuff like that. But it's like, how do I stick with this person to enable them to see something else on the other side? And at the end of the conversation, the individual actually said, thank you. It took my breath away with the amount of anger and violence that this person felt for the circumstances that they were in, and they were blaming me for putting them in there. And it's like, I can't control any of this, but what I can control, let's see what we can do. So having those difficult conversations and being able to be that catalyst to enable that person to take one step forward. Yeah, it's just humans, and we all need that support and help wherever we seek it, and it can come from the strangest of places.
Fascinating to hear about you in that conversation, and using those skills that you've gained from not only coaching, by the sounds of it, from your previous career in being a manager and leading people and enabling them as your natural way, which is what I took from some of that answer. What had you show up as an enabler and someone who didn't want to give advice? Anything in your formative years or the way you were parented? Because I'm always interested in where it comes from as well. I completely hear you about what you like doing and why you like doing it. Where do you think it came from?
My mother is a very determined woman. And, she came to this country at the age of, she turned 21 as she arrived in this country to become a nurse, not knowing anyone, not knowing that she arrived in February and it was bitterly cold and she didn't have the necessary clothes and she didn't even have a coat. And when she came over on the boat, she got friendly with a woman who was coming over with her child to meet up with her husband. And this woman had two coats and she lent my mum a coat because my mum didn't realise how far Liverpool was from London. And she had to get to London from the port in Liverpool. And this woman lent her her coat and just gave her address. And she says, when you've got a coat, just send it back to me. So it's that ability that you have to make relationships with people, even in the strangest of circumstances, because you don't know where that help is coming from. All relationships are standalones, but they can be beautiful in their own way. My granny was also had a big part to play in my life. My mum and my father's relationship broke up, and my granny was there with us. My granny was born in 1890 something. She had my mum late, and she didn't get much education, but she had copper-plated handwriting. She could write better than me, but she wasn't sure about her spelling. As a 6, 7 year old, she'd always say, come, let's get the dictionary and check out this word. And she was never proud or never felt that, or she'd ask me, how do you spell this? And she usually had it right. But there was a woman who was, in her 70s with a little grandchild, and she was willing to ask me for help because she recognized I offered something. And it's like, yeah, doesn't matter who we are, how we are, we can all share and offer stuff and learn from one another and respect one another from that part of you and be humble in some ways. So, yeah, I think, and there have been other people in my life, people I've chosen to be mentors for me in my working life, because for me, I've recognized something in them that I feel they can help me to develop, to understand, to learn about myself as I was then. Because the one thing that's always happening is that I'm always changing, and I love change. It upends me at times, but all I do is try and say, well, what's the significance in this change for me here? What can I learn from it? And it's made me the person I am today, and the way I view the world around me, and the way I view my coaching and my part in being a coach, and offering that service as a coach, as a supervisor. Yeah, I know nothing. I don't even know what I'm going to do next, really. So who am I to tell anyone what to do? It's like, come on, you know what you want. You do know what you want. I don't. So yeah.
Such a nice story. The particular one around your nanny, what a great example for you, and really interesting to hear about some of your formative years and experiences and how that may have fed into who you are as a human being and how you approach dialogue and working with people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just find it so incredible that, you and I can be here having a conversation. We have our own view of the world, but we can still have a conversation, or we can still understand each other enough to be able to enjoy the time we spend together, or to take something from a conversation that will enable us to do whatever we want to do or need to do, you know, to grow relationships with other people, because we know that we can be meaningful for that person, or they can be meaningful to us, you know, whatever that relationship could be. And I remember when I was at uni and I'd studied religious education as part of my degree. The other part was education psychology. Not that I was ever going into education. It was just I needed to go to university, didn't know what to do. I went to work, worked in the bank for about 18 months, and it was like, oh my God, this is so boring. At 19, I was not ready for that. So after a year of working in the bank, I went off to university. And I remember in doing the Old Testament, we had to do some of that in Greek. And it was just being able to see the root language and the word love, how they had so many different words for love. You know, in the English language, we have one word, and it doesn't contain the differences that love can show up in the variety of relationships we can have with people. And it was just one of those things. And I went to Greece back then, and I used to love standing in front of the signposts because I learnt the alphabet, and I could like to go through the alphabet in Greek and change it into English and work out the words. Now I can't. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm lost. But yeah, it was just fun to be able to do that. But that's one of the things that it really made me realize. And I think that's also fed into the way that when I'm working with someone as a coach and even as a supervisor, I really listen to the way they use words to reference themselves and maybe reference the circumstance they're in. Because for me, it stands out in some way. And I'm always interested in what's their meaning for using that word. Because I know what I'm thinking, but I don't understand their meaning. What is their meaning for using that word? And, you know, how is that making them show up as they are today? And why is it important as we sit here today? Because it's very much, it's about the, for me, it's about the here and now. And some of that is a jump over from mindfulness. I've done a lot of mindfulness over the years, and I had the chance to work with a really lovely mindfulness teacher that has helped me. But the way we use language to express ourselves as humans is not the be all and end all, but sometimes we feel it is. That's the only way I can communicate with you. But before we went all Zoom crazy in the old days, I used to do a lot of coaching via phone, and I loved it. Because one of the ways I like to think is to be able to look out the window, and when someone's talking to me over a phone or without a camera, you just have to focus so much more on the tone, the words, the breath, the silence even. And it's just a whole different vibe. I used to love it. I used to try and encourage people just to do it by phone so I could enjoy it.
I'm nodding along, captivated by what you're saying. And I really agree with all the points about language and how it's so important, but also it isn't the only thing we use to communicate. But I also really am interested in language because ultimately it kind of distinguishes us from other beings, the language that we create. And there is a lot of meaning behind the words we use often. And when we can tune into that as coaches or clients, it can be really illuminating, enlightening to understand how it impacts us.
Yeah, and whether when we use a word or groups of words, or we put a sentence together, that we refer as us or whatever it is. It's like, what's the thinking behind that? How did you get to there? And what is it about being there that isn't supporting you to be over there, if over there is where you wish to be? And sometimes even the words we use when they're reflected back to us, it's like, do I really mean that about me or my circumstances? So it's being able to, as you said, as a human, to be able to have that chance to reflect back things to people, or even reflect it in the way it's landed with you, because you're a little individual, unique little diamond in your own right, and it's like, oh, the light's bounced off me in that way. Is that how you meant it to land with me? It's like, no, I didn't. And I recognize that from being a senior leader. I remember once one of my managers came up to me and she says, two of your managers upstairs are really upset because you said blah, blah, blah. And that really offended them. It's like, did I? I didn't mean it like that. I said, yeah, but they're really upset. And it's like, oh my gosh. So yeah, I had to go and apologize, because that wasn't my intention, but that's how it landed. And it's recognized. It doesn't matter where you are on the food chain. It doesn't matter who you are. We can all do these things and we don't mean it. It's the intention. And that's another thing that I like to get a bit of a feel for people. What's the intention that's going on for you behind all this?
I'd love to nerd out a bit more about this, and I've got a few more things I want to add into this before we kind of move on to the next part. But as well as that, what I find interesting is what we create when we receive language, or what we create with the language. Because as we think, we're using language to think. And if we take language down to the core, it's actually just made up of symbols. It's pure creation. So your colleagues, yes, you apologize to them, and that's really nice of you to do so, but they also created the meaning behind the way it landed, and that's on them as well. And it's interesting how we maybe attribute responsibility to meaning of language when we receive words, whether it's written or verbalized. It is such a fascinating topic when we start unpacking that.
Yeah, it is, and it has wide-ranging effects as we look at history and we see what language has created over history. The two extremes, from extremely incredible things that have enabled the human race to do so much for one another, to the most destructive elements of us to come into fruition and to repeatedly happen. And he said, okay, so where's the learning that's happening here? What is it? What is it in us as well that maybe we're reluctant to take the learning? What? I don't know. What is it that goes on for us that creates the repetition of behavior? What is the gift in that behavior that works for some and not for others?
Fascinating. I'm really enjoying going off on these tangents and freestyling.
Yeah.
If I bring a little bit of structure back into this,
please,
I'm gonna ask you to just reflect back to me, or maybe not even reflect back to me. Tell me, what was the decision process like from moving from civil service to training as a coach? You briefly mentioned that you were coaching informally in that role anyway. I'm just interested in that brief potted history from going from full-time employment, making decisions, train as a coach, and then going full-time independent. And I'd love to track what that journey looked like from there on, I guess, for the last 7 years.
Okay. My first training as a coach took place in 1999 in the civil service, because they felt that was the way I was a junior manager, and that was the way for managers to work better with staff, etc. So that's where it all started. Grow model was the be all and end all. I recognized as I did other jobs and moved up the ladder to manage, you know, 200-300 staff at a time, that the grow model wasn't the be all and end all, and I needed to find out other ways to support my staff and support the work we were all trying to do. I worked in the tribunals at that time, immigration. So it was dealing with people who are under a lot of stress. Not only the staff working with those people, but those individuals themselves. And I'd worked with some of my staff to help them to move on, to improve themselves in different ways. At one point, some people even left to be able to make those improvements due to the coaching that I was able to work with them on. But that also made me realize that there was more to me than some of the tick boxing elements that I had to get on with in the civil service. And I had moved around in the civil service. I did tons of jobs just because every 3 years I literally did something different. I didn't work full time in the civil service either, because I didn't want to work for anyone full time. So even from then, I've been a bit of a weirdo. I worked doing IT for a small IT company part-time, working in the city with big investment companies, doing cabling. I then 10 years ago, towards the end of my career, I trained as a plumber. And
Wow.
I used to do some of that. Whilst I was still working for the civil service, I also worked as a carer. In between time, my mum ran her own care home at the end of the 90s to the early noughties, and I helped her manage that. You know, I was a mortgage advisor. So people working closely with people in lots of different arenas was something that I was drawn to. And therefore, when I got to a point in 2012 and that where I was questioned, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? It then made me look at what is it that I really enjoy from all this human interaction that I've been having in so many different guises. And it boiled down to being able to enable people to achieve some end result, whatever that end result was. And most of the time it was through using my coaching skills, my tiny little grow model coaching skills, which I recognize I was struggling with. And therefore I found Animas. I only went to Animas. I didn't go anywhere else. I talked to a few other people who was at the Animas. In those days, they did face-to-face open days. And I talked to a few people there. They'd been to some of the other schools, and it sounds like, nah, don't want to waste my time doing that. Animas tick the box. So I trained with Animas 2014, and I remember my first started in February. That was my first 2 days training, and I remember walking away because I thought I was a brilliant listener. You know, I had that off pat. I walked away from that weekend. It's like, what have you been doing to these poor people all these years, Michelle? You know, it's like, oh God, reading Nancy Klein's Time to Think, oh my goodness, you know. So yeah, it just opens up so much, so much. The world is a different place for me from taking that course. It opened me up to, you know, I was doing mindfulness. It opened me up to actually, how do I incorporate some of this into my coaching? I struggled with that right at the beginning, trying to create that. And yeah, so that just led, and it's just been a massive, the last 7 years, I've just been evolving, I think, faster than I had over the previous, let's say, 20 years. Because I always used to set myself at least 5-year plans. My plans were pretty rubbish because it was like, okay, I need to get from there to there in 5 years. How are you going to do it? Don't know, but I'll get there. I did. I always did. I don't know how, but I always got to my end result. Somehow, whatever I did, because that was in my head, was taking me one step closer. Um, and for me, it's like I say to people, so how do you nibble away at whatever it is to get you one step closer to where you want to be? So yeah, so coaching then, I then decided, well, the only way for me to really make this change and make it work was to just walk away from, I wouldn't say it was a well-paid job, but I enjoyed it because I enjoyed working with the people. I knew what I was doing. I got a regular income, but it was like, yeah, time to do something different. Throw yourself out there. I'm not good at marketing, still not good at marketing, still don't like marketing, still don't like doing stuff online. And me, one of the ways up until very recently, one of the ways I've sort of got myself out there was to belong to network groups. So I was pretty much out there in networking groups, talking to people. So for me, it's always been that face to face, yet again, something that's played a big part in my life. It's always been that face to face, talking to people. And yeah, that's how I've got new clients. That's how I've got clients. That's how I've got people to know that I exist. And over the last few years, I think that's helped because there's been an element of referrals going on because I haven't done networking on that level at all. It's a lot different and difficult doing it through Zoom with network groups. But yeah, I don't know if that answered any of your questions.
It did. It was a mesmerizing wild ride on your journey. And I really enjoyed it. And just the plumbing part kind of blew me away a little bit as well, I've got to say.
I like DIY. Whenever I bought a new house, one of the things I always did was rip out the kitchen and bathroom. Don't ask me why, bit of a lunatic. But the one thing I would not play with was water. I always had to get a plumber in. I can build cabinets, I could put them up on my own. I did some weird stuff on my own because I was on my own back in the day then. And so I got to a point where it's like, I need to know how to be a plumber. So yeah, so I spent a year training in my spare time, taking time off work, using my annual leave, doing exams and everything so that I, as I said, I could play with water to a certain extent.
Love it. Love it. And something else that piqued my interest around your business building journey as well was you speaking about networking groups and really tuning into that face-to-face relationship and putting yourself out there and, I don't know, working the crowd. Did you work the crowd? What did it look like?
I don't know if I worked the crowd. I confused a lot of the crowd. It was great. It was absolutely great because it was that whole thing of I had so many new people to tap into, people who did things for a start I didn't even know existed. So that fed my whole human connection thing that goes on for me. It helped me as well to understand who I was because part of networking was that you had 60 seconds to say who you were and to put your ask on the table. And yeah, on a weekly basis, 3 times a week in different groups, I was doing that. And it really helps you get that immediate feedback, as I said earlier on, where people will say, oh, so you can help me to lose weight. Oh, so you could coach athletes. It's like, yeah, this message is crap. Well, I need to change this message. And so you really start to learn and think and understand, you know, who am I being? How am I being? What is it that people are seeing? And being able to ask people those questions. Why, you know, what was it about what I said that you took X or Y from it? You learn immediate feedback. What more can you ask for? Wonderful stuff. It worked for me because that's where I felt comfortable in my discomfort. Yet again, standing up on the front, in front of people like that, it's like, oh God, no, I don't really want to do this. It sounds silly. It's like, no, go for it. Yeah, why not? But then you can get the feedback. You can talk to people. People get interested. Mostly if you say something that clicks with them, they, oh, I know someone that, could well use your service. Here's a card. How do I get in touch with them? Blah, blah, blah. And yeah, for me, that's what I knew was going to work for me. And that's why I threw myself into marketing myself in that way, because that was my strength.
Really interesting to hear that instant feedback loop that we get from speaking out loud about what we do. I think is fascinating, because I must have had over 1,000 conversations the last year and a half, and often I get asked about, what do I do? What type of coach are you? What do you niche? And the word evolution we used earlier, and I think that process it speeds up the evolution of understanding ourselves, because we just get used to saying it out loud, and then like, oh, you hear yourself, and then you hear what someone says back to you, and you change it the next time. And what I say to someone today sometimes is different from yesterday, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's a similar experience that you've had through that.
Yeah. Your audience makes you change the way you approach them. I used to present stuff back in the day, 1999, when data protection came out. I was a data protection officer, and we had 40,000 files in our office that I had to go through. These things have been existing since the 50s, and some of the stuff that was written in them, it was a joke, and yet it was like, oh my God, you got to do something about this. And you had to train people to understand what this all meant and how it could affect them. But each time you faced that crowd, I had to scan the room, say, who's here today? What are they looking for? What do they need from me here to make this absolutely boring, dry topic something enjoyable that they will walk away with something to remember? So yeah, all those things feed into who I am today in a weird way. But it's weird talking to you here. It's made me draw on that, and I haven't thought about that for donkey's years. But yeah, it's something that made me come to realization of how I really like to interact with other humans, and that interaction is about me supporting them. Yet again, that wasn't coaching, but it was about me supporting them to be able to do what they needed to do and to learn something that was boring, to say the least. But how could I? And that's where humor plays a big part for me. I have been told off about my humor as a senior leader as well. And I took that on board as well. But humor plays a big part for me, because sometimes we get caught up with the, aspects of life that can make us feel really negative about everything, including ourselves. And it's like, how can we just flip that at times so that we can see, one, the beauty within ourselves, and the humor that may allow us to glimpse, just to put a smile on our face, because that's a muscle. That's it. You've done your workout for the day. You've actually smiled and you've done some muscle work there, and that's it. You can go away now. So it's all about, being part of us. We're lucky as as part of the animal kingdom that we have humor. I don't think my cats have humor. Maybe they will tell me otherwise, but we have that to tap into, and that can do so much for us. And just having a smile for people, going to work, where you go to work and things are down and people can look so miserable. I've never felt the right to look miserable when I go to work. And it's not because I forced it. I don't need to force it. I'm surrounded by people who have all their unique things about them that I can tap into, and just change that space that I'm in. So yeah. And I used to say anyhow, my whole aim in life when I was senior manager was that I got my management team to be experts. So I knew when I was out the office, I could do whatever I want because they could handle it. And even if something went wrong, it didn't matter because together we learned from it. That was it. I came to work to be able to put my feet up on the desk and just I used to get told to go away by some of my junior managers. Can you leave my team alone? Stop talking to them and go away. Because if I was away for a week on holiday, for me, the best way to find out all the information I needed was not to sit down in front of a computer and look at emails. Just go and talk to people. Got everything and more. It's like, yeah, done that. Spent half the day talking to people, seen them all, got all the information. Now I'm up to speed. The odd email I need to deal with, I'll deal with it. But that's all they're so useful, they're so helpful. Why do we ignore one another?
And talking to people, as I heard there, was the cornerstone of you building your practice in those networking spaces.
Yeah.
And that must have been around 2015, 2016.
17. 18.
Has it just snowballed from there? Is that literally the nucleus of your marketing and the way you do your business?
It's the only marketing. I would say I've done a little bit online. I did have a website, then I took away my website because now I do have a little bit of a website. I've never felt drawn towards having that whole thing online all the time and updating it. I have good ideas, but I don't have the desire to spend the time online dealing with it. I'd rather talk to people. I do less networking now just because the way I want to live my life, the time how I want to use my time, it's less of a part that it plays. And talking to the people I do talk to, more doors have opened over that time. To me, I had a conversation yesterday with someone who has invited me to become a supervisor for their small startup. So, things are opening up in different ways. So I do less of that, more of other things. I've got camper vans, so sometimes I go away, and when I'm away, I can still work because I have my mobile internet with me, and got my antennae on the roof and sling my husband out to go for a walk or tell him to sit down the bottom and be quiet and draw because he's an artist. And I will, got my headphones on. I will work away with my clients. So,
Living the dream. I love it. When you look at your business building journey, then what are the practical and emotional hurdles that you think of over that time that have been significant, shall we say?
Yeah, it was the whole thing of who am I? How do I put this across? The word coach has got so many meanings out there when you talk to people. So I really had to understand and be able to say who I was at that point in time. And obviously that keeps changing. So I suppose that causes me enough problems. And it was about getting customers, getting clients, and learning how to work with my clients, mostly with the different needs that I drew people to me for a lot of different reasons. And at the beginning, it was because I was in the civil service, and I got all these people who were part of the civil service. Not that we ever talked about the civil service as part of the coaching, but because they felt I knew where they were coming from being of service. Because for me, the civil service was, I was offering my service to people, and I could be of service to someone. And I think that's something, yeah, again, it's just having this conversation with you and thinking of, what's the threads in my life here? And it's like, yeah, being of service. I've never wanted to work in a big corporate private stuff. That's never appealed to me. But being of service and, having to deal with the struggles that some people faced each day. My first civil service post was within what is known as DWP. So it was the benefits arena. And some of the people that I had to deal with there, I can remember, like when people had businesses, I had men in their 60s who had had businesses all their lives. And because of the economic downturn, they lost everything. And having to deal with a man or a woman who had done that in their life, and then there they were in front of you having to ask for benefit, and they felt like nothing. And it was like, how do you make this person feel you are still significant to the community? You're still a significant person. You still have much to offer. This is a system in place to help you just at this particular point in your life. It means nothing else. It doesn't take away what you've achieved to this point, what you could go on to achieve. So, being able to, yeah, so there's lots of threads like that I think have led me as well and feed into this whole thing of, for me, being a coach, being a supervisor, being a mentor is I'm being of service to this person. And hopefully that service is going to be an enabler for them to create and do whatever they want to do with the end result that they want to achieve.
Love it. Thank you. And you may or may not know this because you're not so online, or you're not online as much. What I take is, but being of service is a huge thread in the coaching community right now, in terms of when we think about ourselves as practitioners out in the world trying to build a business, where are we coming from? Are we coming from a space of trying to get clients, trying to make more money, or are we coming from a space of being of service? And there's some really interesting books on that, Melissa Ford being one of them, and Steve Chandler and Rich Litvin tap into that in the Prospect Coach as well.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that when you reference, well, why is it? What is it that I do? What is the threads of my professional and personal development? And clearly that was there before coaching as well.
Yeah, it's always been very important to me. I've never done a job because of the pay packet. I've never gone for promotion because I can get more money. It's always got to have meaning to me, because that meaning has to then have a meaning to the wider, whatever that wider community or people that I was involved in. And I recognize that because I remember hearing other people talk about, oh, I need to go this. And I remember one of my bosses actually going for a post, and she hated it. She absolutely hated it. And she just disliked it. But she said, oh, but it gives me the money. It's like, but you're in so much pain. You are in so much pain. What is the gain here when you're on a daily basis in that pain? How is that in service of bettering you when you're pulling? And she couldn't even, I didn't ask her in those ways and those words at the time, because I didn't know those words at the time. But I did ask her about, what is she getting from being in that situation? She couldn't understand it. She said, I don't know. I just feel like chucking it all in now. Like, wow, you did all that to get there, and then knowing that that was part of it. And that was the weird thing. She knew that she was not going to be doing this and going into this new post with the energy and the drive and the happiness. But she just felt, oh, I need that for the money. And it's always, you know, that's always stuck with me. And yeah, it's just not been me. That's not me. So we're all uniquely different. We're all diamonds. We're all diamond geezers. As a Londoner, born in London, we're all diamond geezers, and we've all got different faces, and the light bounces off of us in different ways. And yeah, we've all got a lot to offer.
Thank you. What I'd love to know that I think next is around you looking back at your business building journey, because what I get the sense that you're reflecting back from hindsight, or looking back from hindsight, and creating these threads now in the conversation. As you look back at where you were when you started the business building journey 2015, what advice would you give yourself from this space of knowing?
When you say advice, what can I interpret it as I choose to?
Well, you said you don't like giving advice earlier, so maybe it's the
yes.
interpret away. Interpret
okay.
away.
I don't have any advice because, yes, again, I have this naive belief that everything I did was for a reason, and everything I've done has led me to where I am today, and I'm happy where I am today. So therefore, thank you, Michele, for taking that wild step out there. And thank you to the close friends and family around me that no one actually said, oh, you're an idiot to leave that job. They just let me do what I do best, which is just step out and do what I want to do. So I can only thank myself for leading me to this place. So yeah, I don't think that's advice, but.
Well, it sounds like you were looking at those Greek letters as well as some Greek philosophy with that answer. That was really interesting, and it resonates, I've got to say. And it's just, I've heard similar threads to that question that we have to experience, and almost everything that we do, like you say, leads us to where we are now. So if anything was changed on that trajectory, we might not be here. No. So the fact that you're happy with where you are, then it makes complete sense to me, that answer.
Yeah, you know, yeah, I'm sure it could have gone in many different directions. But I do believe that we all have the ability to create. We are all very creative. And it's about tapping into that creativity as and where we are at that point in our lives. The recognition of whatever you recognize about yourself at that point. And for me, it's very much about, you know, what is it that stands out for you today as we sit here, you know, because that's what's important to you now. Walk away from our conversation and it'll be something else, could be something else, could be something because that conversation has enabled something else to come up, or it could be something that's been all, you know, a phone call that comes through that we can't control. But how does that add to it all, you know? Yeah, for me, it's always about adding. I haven't quite got to grips with how it subtracts from things because you're forever going. It's interesting. There you are. I'll shut up now.
Perhaps we can revisit that one.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
conscious of time as well, because we haven't contracted to run over. So I've got a few quick fire questions for you.
Go for it.
You mentor and supervise other coaches. I heard about your advice or non-advice for yourself, your earlier self, but what do you see as a common challenge for coaches trying to build a coaching practice? And I get that that's not specifically the work that you do with coaches, but I'm assuming those conversations come up around building the business and the challenges that coaches are under in that journey, if you like.
Yeah, a lot of it is about their own self-confidence and becoming a coach and what that will mean. So, how do I get clients? I don't feel confident. I don't feel I can do this. And it's about, what is it that that person needs to do to believe enough that the choice that they have made, because I always ask, why coaching? What brought you here? And everyone's got a beautiful story about what brought them there. So it's like, okay, so that's your initial meaning. So what's the gap in between that thing that drew you here and made you take this time and create this cost? Because it's not cost about money, it's the time in your life which you can't replace. That is the biggest cost for me. It's that time you want to offer to this thing. And why is it that you feel that you can't then create whatever it is with this thing? Yet you're drawn to it and you're willing to put the time and effort into it. So yeah, for me, that's one of the things I see that comes up over and over again.
Really interesting answer and question that you pose to them off the back of that. And I guess you get lots of different answers back, but I'm sure
Yeah.
it sparks off a few light bulbs.
Yeah. It's so interesting. The story, everyone's story on what drew them and brought them to coaching and their whole energy behind it. You can see it and feel it. And how do we take that energy?
I've heard about loads of experience that you've had, whether that's professional or mentors or people you've come across, your own clients. Are there any books that stand out that have been really seminal for you when you look back at training as a coach and really learning the profession? And that can also be the professional development of the craft of coaching, but also the business development side of things, if you've ever read any books in that space or had any philosophies that you've taken through.
Yeah, I think Time to Think by Nancy Klein is always going to be my number one, because that really alerted me to the whole listening spectrum. And it really made me sort of go down that journey of trying to understand, how do I do this better? And what can better look like for me? So for me, that's the one book that I always mention to people. Have you read? Have you read? Because I know she's got a second book out and everything like that. But the first one, it's just, and you don't have to read it as a whole book. You can just pick out chapters. And, I remember using it when I read it back in the day for my meetings and how it changed the way I could approach a meeting, because I recognized, God, you're at listening. You're not that brilliant, So for me, that was a real eye opener. And I'm just looking at I think my mindfulness, and there's no one book. I think that has helped me as well to really recognize what's going on for me as a coach, just by being involved in mindfulness. And I was really lucky, as I quickly mentioned earlier on, that the person that I trained with, a woman called Susan Heerman, she actually trained with John Kabat-Zinn, and did some training with Mark Williams rather. And John Kabat-Zinn is the man that started MBSR, mindfulness based stress stress reduction training. And it was just, she was just such a calm, open person. And that whole thing around mindfulness of looking at things with fresh eyes. Because even though, you know, you said you've done that before, you're different now. Each day you're different. So even when you look at something that you say you've done before, what would it mean for you today? So we keep that open mind, not only towards ourselves, but also towards the people that we are in contact with as coaches, as supervisors, everything like that. So that openness and that not knowing, I just love being in the space of not knowing. And I know that's something that's been with me for a long time, but I've never been able to express it until I really got into the coaching with Animas. So
Thank you. Really interesting to hear about that combination of, I guess, influence from Nancy Klein and mindfulness. So what's next for Michele? What's on the horizon?
What's next? What's on the horizon? To enjoy getting involved in some new spaces when it comes to my supervision and coaching. New spaces where I've been, over the last couple of years, I've been sought out by coaches and supervisees because of my ethnicity. Not that I couldn't understand it initially, but it really put me in a different space. What else could I offer that I'm not actually doing now? And with my supervision, I am also working with people in a certain space. They're going out into the world and trying to encourage corporate life to understand how working differently with diversity and ethnicity and all of that can bring more into their workspace and give their business a lot more. So I'm working with people like that, and just in general, being able to open up my abilities to work with more people who are Black, brown, BAME, whatever the labels are that we use, but people who are in a situation where their diversity is working against them. And yeah, how can I support these people? So yeah, that's a space that's opening up for me more and more each year.
Fascinating and rewarding by the sounds of it. And it's a really interesting topic that probably needs a whole nother hour to dive into. And maybe we can do that another time. But really fascinating to hear about your story. I've absolutely loved it. I've been hanging off your every word. And something that's interesting to me is, obviously we had this email exchange a little while ago when I asked you to be interviewed, and we had a brief chat. But I said to you, I was like, you sounded apprehensive about it. And you mentioned about being center of attention, but I've loved it. I've really loved listening to you, tell your story. What's it like for you to just go through that process and be center of attention for a bit?
I still don't like it. I hated the thought of it when I got married. That was the one thing. It's like, really enjoy putting it all together, but it's like, oh my God, I'm center of attention for a whole day. That's like distracting. That is so distracting. It's just me. But I knew, yet again, when I get into the space, it'll be all right. But it's just that initial thinking about that space. And yeah, all of us, it's like people say, oh, you should write a book. It's like, well, everyone should write a book because everyone has incredible stories to tell. Why would mine be any more incredible than anyone else? I don't know. So it's partly that, I think, that plays for me. But it's been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. That's why I said I'd rather just freewheel and just let's see what comes up. Because as with my 5-year planning, it's a bit fluid. I like the fluidity of life. I really do. You know, I've always liked things to be a bit fluid. I enjoy what may come from that. And part of it is not knowing what may come from that and just creating. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Michele. Yeah, I've loved freestyling with you, and I will see you again soon, I hope.
You will. Thank you, Brinsley. It's been brilliant. Enjoy the rest of your day.